Anybody who doesn't know, it's CAS week. So we decided to invite the nominees for the Cinema Audio Society Technical Achievement Award to show their wares and say hi to everybody. So we're going to have Gordon Moore from Lectrosonics starting off. So anyway, I'll turn it over to Gordon Moore. Gordon.
Thank you. First of all, just in case you haven't met him yet, Kelly, step forward. Just to introduce our new West Coast sales manager. This is Kelly Fair. Many of you know him from other lives in the industry. So now he's in his last job.
Let's hope so. Huh?
We're going to keep him. And so anyway, you'll be seeing him around quite a bit. But we're real delighted to have him on board the team. Now his job is to undo the damage he did me in previous years.
Oh, sorry about that. Well, got to work on that.
We'd like to thank the CAS basically for the nomination, and today we're going to talk about the Venue-2, which is our nominated product. The Venue-2 is the next generation of the Venue receiver, which is a single rack unit that is modular, can hold 6 modules for 6 channels of wireless in a single rack space. And there's been a number of key improvements in it over the previous generation. First and foremost, wideband reception. Each module can receive 75 megahertz of frequency bandwidth. So it helps you have greater flexibility in a tough RF environment. You can cover more spectrum, you can get more done with fewer selection of units. So it gives you a lot more flexibility. I'm sure you've all been in situations where you've arrived on a site and block 21 was totally swamped. That's Albuquerque, for example. But if you've got a block 21, you can't use it. Well, these cover the full bandwidth. So we have band A1, which is basically blocks 470, 19, and 20. We have the B band, which is 21, 22, and 23. And we have the C band, which is 24, 25, and 26. I'll be talking about those bands a little bit later when we get into the discussion about the FCC regulations, because I know a lot of you have questions, and the FCC has finally spoken, so we can speak more authoritatively as to what's going to happen over the next 4 or 5 years. The other thing that we have in the Venue-2 is TCP/IP capabilities. You can put it on a network. In fact, you can put multiples on a network and monitor all of them simultaneously. It works on standard Ethernet protocols, so you can basically, if you get in a situation, Jeff Wexler and I were joking just a little bit earlier about those scenes where the talent has to go do something and you don't really want to be anywhere near him when he's doing it, but your receivers need to be close because of RF problems. You can go ahead and set your venue out where the hazardous thing is, and you can be back in a nice safe place connected by a Cat5 through a switch and be able to monitor and see everything that's going on and actually control your receivers. So we'll talk about the software for that in a little bit. The biggest innovation that we've introduced with Venue-2 is IQ, or intelligent Q filtering. The Q, when we talk about a filter, the Q is the ratio of the bandwidth of the filter versus the depth of the filter. A high Q filter is an extremely narrow filter that's highly selective, and a low Q filter is something that covers a much wider band range and isn't quite as selective and doesn't have as much amplitude. Well, high Q filtering has its advantages because it helps you reduce interference from other sources. And now we're talking about RF signal, not audio. With intelligent Q, what we've done is we've put in a circuit that monitors the RSSI feed, the radio strength signal indicator coming off of the RF front end. And when we have an extremely good, solid signal, the Venue-2 automatically narrows the filter down and lowers the sensitivity. You don't need high sensitivity if you've got good, strong signal strength. There's a couple of advantages to this. One is if you've got one of those scenes where, you know, Clint Eastwood's riding in on a horse from a quarter mile away and it's a long shot and they're coming in closer and closer, so you've set him up for a quarter-watt transmitter, and then as he rides right by where your card is located, and suddenly you've got too much signal and you can overload the front end. Well, that's impossible with the Venue-2 because the IQ filtering, as the signal strength increases, will make the filter tighter and lower the sensitivity. Now, when you lower the sensitivity in the presence of a strong signal, you're also cutting the interfering signals from other sources, outside sources. So if you're on a set that is extremely crowded, you know, there's the old myth about higher power means more intermod. That's only true and depending on how you handle it in terms of your transmitter design. All our transmitters in the past have used very good filters to prevent that intermount product from developing. So in Venue-2, what happens, you go to a quarter-watt transmitter, you can have provide, let's say every last one of you guys in this room was on a quarter-watt at this range. We could have a lot of channels popping because we're going to have high signal strength from each one of you, but an extremely tight filter, so we can pack you in tighter. And then you all leave and go out in the parking lot and head down the street, and yet we still want to capture your audio. As you get distant, the filter notices the signal strength beginning to drop. It opens up the filter, gathers more energy, increases sensitivity, and we stay locked in. So intelligent Q, that's what that's all about. And it's really effective. You can take that quarter-watt transmitter now. It's kind of fun with the software. Take the quarter-watt transmitter, put it right by the antenna of the receiver, and see that signal strength actually drop. Because you just don't need to be highly sensitive when you're at close range with a quarter watt. So it gives you a lot of sensitivity, a lot of capability in a crowded RF environment. We're using a very good SAW filter design in the VRT2s. In fact, there is no VRS version because the intelligent Q filtering gives you the basic equivalency of the VRT filtering. So you get extremely selective. Another thing that we've done is improve the algorithm in the diversity switching. And if you guys cranked up the gain and listen real closely, you could hear that little tick sometimes in the as the antenna switch. Well, now what's going on, and actually all we're doing, let me clarify something about that antenna switching. We don't switch antennas, nor do we switch front ends. Our philosophy of radio design has always been use both antennas all the time. We mix them. And what we do with the antenna diversity is we look at both antennas, A and B, and we compare the signal strength and the phase. Because what will happen in a diversity dropout is one of those signals will go into the reverse phase, and if you're combining them at that point, you're going to get a cancellation. So the switch that occurs is we're switching the phase of the second antenna, so that the two antennas are always summed together. Now, there's also a mode in the Venue systems, both the old Venue and the current Venue, called ratio mode. And that's the one that you use when you absolutely need bulletproof performance. And in that case, it uses both front ends. And in ratio diversity, what we do is we mix the two antennas together as combined signals, and we mix it on a ratio of signal to noise. So let's say you have two equally good signals. It's a 50-50 mix through an optical mixer internally. And then when this antenna begins to degrade, we lower the sensitivity on that one and raise the other one. It literally is panning back and forth to give you a sum total of both antennas, but adjusting according to the signal to noise ratio. There's a high frequency noise detector that literally is panning it back and forth. So when you combine two antennas, you'll automatically get a 3 decibel improvement in your signal reception. And 3 decibels is double the power. That's the equivalent of going from a quarter watt to 500 milliwatts if you're within range. A lot of people will sometimes say, they're looking at the scan charts on the receivers. One thing to keep in mind, we're showing you the bottom end of the scan. We wanted to give you a realistic scale for scanning on your receivers. The front panel of the receivers would have to be about this tall. So we want to give you resolution when you're down at that failure point, at the low end of the spectrum. So when you see a full spike, you're really seeing the bottom part of a full spike. The top part is unnecessary because you got plenty of strength. We're giving you the bottom end of the field strength so that you have a realistic idea where your signal is. The proof of that is fire up a transmitter, look at your signal strength indicator on your receiver at close range, and then double your distance from the receiver. What you'll notice is that it's not going to drop down by half, which is what it should do if we were dealing with a real time indicator. But because we're really showing you the bottom of the scale, it won't drop. Any questions about that?
Boom's in.
Yeah, boom's in. So,
You gotta point the mic at the guy who's talking. Anyways.
we're looking for a qualified boom operator. Anybody in the room? So, The wideband, currently in wideband transmitters, we have the LT transmitter, which is available in the A1, B1, C1. And the LT transmitter has the ability to, you have a switch on top. That switch could be nothing at all, something to keep the talent, give them a toy to play with that doesn't do anything at all. Or you can make it a power switch, or you can make it a mute switch. It's up to you. It's programmable from the front, and of course you can lock talent out with it. And of course it responds to the Dweedle tones, so you can control it through the remote control.
Yeah.
And yes, sir.
If we set it as a mute switch for the talent's benefit, can we unset it from the road?
No. The question was, for the guys that are listening on the outside, if you set it as a mute switch for the talent's benefit, can you disable that remotely? And the answer is no. Next up, we have the LMB, which is basically our entry-level transmitter, fixed antenna, 50 milliwatt, and it also has the switch on top, and it does not respond to the Dweedle tones. It's kind of the entry-level unit. You all saw the announcement at the beginning of the month for the HMA plug-on transmitter. That is, I've got units on the shelf. I just don't have the FCC approvals yet. We're still waiting for the labs to finish with the testing. But the HMA will be shipping very soon. And basically, that's your plug-on wideband transmitter. And it does have Dweedle tones. There was a request on JW Sound, I believe, for that very function. We went back and took a look at it, and the only Dweedle tone function we can't give you on the HMA is going to be the sleep and unsleep command. But if you need to change levels while it's in the Zeppelin, if you need to change your frequency, you can do so with the remote tone controls. So
is it a plug-on? Or
it's a plug-on.
The same form factor as the other plug-on?
Same form factor as the other programs, other ones. The only difference is there's a USB port on the side. So if we come up with some other clever little thing to add to it, you can update the firmware yourself.
Is it actually the same size as the previous?
Yes, it is. So it'll be basically a straight across swap. But it gives you the wideband transmission. So, any questions there? Well, one of the key things on the Venue-2 is that it has remote software. So whoever's handling the switcher, let's go to the computer screen and I'll walk you through the software. Let's see. I need to share. Desktop.
Yeah. And then share, and then just click on your software and be ready to roll.
Okay. Okay, so you might want to get a little closer here, or you can watch it there on that screen. But basically, you can connect, and you can actually configure a system in advance. You don't even need to be plugged in. You can do a pre-configuration of a system and then load it into a receiver if you want. But let's take this from a workflow point of view. You walk in, it's the first day on set. You arrive, at early in the morning before everybody else, right? And you connect to your unit via USB, and it comes up with a list. You can have, if you've got a switch, you can have as many Venue-2s together on the network as you want. We can display as many channels on that screen as you can cram. It all depends on the resolution of your computer. After you connect, it does a quick poll of the unit, and it shows you the units, the modules that are detected in the system. To the left screen, we have what we call the session, and there's a little representation of a rack mount. And if we had multiple Venue-2s or even Venues, this software will work with the Venue wideband. So if you've got a current Venue, you can use this software as well with that and actually have multiples of each in your system. So it'll detect and it'll show you everything it sees on the screen. And then you have down beneath it, you have your actual racks. Now this indicator right here, it shows you what is actually in the rack. So you see this says C1, B1, and A1. Let's say you had a large system. You had 24 channels all stacked up, and you had a problem with the battery or maybe there was some issue. Now, the unit has some alerts. It'll actually come up and give you yellow alerts on the screen. Well, this little module right here, this little square, will go yellow or red on you, depending on the severity of the problem. So you can identify not only which unit in the rack it is, but which module in the unit. It maps according to the topographic view of the receiver. So you can actually want to do a scan and see what's going on in the area. After everybody fires up all their gear, you just simply call up the frequency, hit scan, and hit start. And it'll start scanning what's actually in the environment. And that's this unit here. This is what's actually happening right here in this room right now. Now you could go get ready with the rest of your cart, start laying things out, you know, get your cup of coffee, whatever you want to do. It's going to take about 60 seconds to do a complete scan. And it doesn't care what the signal is, it's going to map it. If the receiver sees it, it's going to map it. So this is our current environment in this room right now. And you can see there's quite a bit happening. Welcome to LA. Okay. And sounds like, looks like, do we have the transmitter on? We do. There we go. So you can see there's one wireless channel cropping up there as a pretty big spike right here.
You can hover over it, and it'll tell you
Right.
what.
Now you can also zoom. You notice I've got a big screen here. You can go into this. Let's stop the coordination. And at this point, you can export this to the frequency coordinator. And these little reminder screens can be turned off if you don't want to see them. So we've now exported this. You can also take this scan data and you can put it into a file and store it. So if you do Detroit on one day and then you do Grand Rapids on another day, the next day you go back to Detroit, you don't have to rescan if you don't want to. You can just load the scan file. So now you've done your scan and we've exported it to frequency coordination. Now we go to the frequency coordinator. And what you'll see here are we've got in this receiver, we've got 3 receivers, one at 669,900, one at 572,600. Now, if there was a problem with any one of these channels, you get this red indicator right here at the top that indicates there's a frequency coordination problem. Well, if you got a large system and you want to coordinate the whole thing, the way to handle that is to go ahead and now you can zoom in. You can just simply grab a handle over here and increase your resolution of your screen if you want. So now you can see a little more. This indicator right here shows you a band frequency. That's the astronomy bands, 608 to 614. Now, how do we correct the coordination? Well, the easy way is just simply go up here and coordinate selected channels. And you click on that, and we have a new coordination. Want to see it again?
Yeah.
Don't blink. And there's a new coordination. We now have a complete coordination for these 3 channels. And it's very rapid. It happens very quickly. Now you can go in, and what you want to do, right down at the bottom is an adjustable threshold. This is looking at the amount of noise you're willing to tolerate. For example, if you're in a real hot environment, you can raise the threshold and it'll allow more frequencies in higher levels of interference. And that might be perfectly fine if you're on a closed set and you're working at close range, you can cram more channels. You're going for the long shot, you want to get as much range as possible. So what I always tell people to do is start, you can take it lower and see, let's say if we take it down to here, can we get a coordination that'll work with that? Yes, we can. Now you're looking at it and you're saying, now wait a minute, right there, that looks like it's in the middle of some interference. Well, it's a lot of cases it's a matter of the resolution. And if you zoom in and take a real tight look at it, you'll see that, yeah, in fact, it did find kind of a nice little notch right down there below the threshold. So it's got great resolution. So you can coordinate your entire system. Okay, now you've got a coordination. You want to program the receiver, the Venue-2. So you simply go up here to deploy to system, click it, and now the Venue-2 has been programmed to match the coordination. And if you have a large-scale system, if you've got those 18 channels set up or a 24-channel system, it'll load all 24 channels in the receiver. Now you've got a completely programmed system, completely coordinated. You can go up to your channels, and look at the individual channels. And on the screen, it shows you the block it's in, or the band, and what block it is within that band, the frequency, and if you've got one of the legacy transmitters with the switches, your switch settings to match. And right here in this window is our rolling RF indicator. It's an RF strip chart. One of the most frustrating, this was something I insisted on when we were designing the program, because the most frustrating thing for me is to be running a system and you get a hit on a channel and it comes and goes. I mean, it's gone. You can't just spin around and look at your receivers and see what happened because it's already passed. It's already history. This is a 10-second rolling window, and it shows you, you can take a look at that and within 10 seconds pretty much identify which channel took that hit. You'll see the RF go from active down to nothing. So let's see, is this a B1? Okay. So we can go to this unit. Now you can double click on a channel and get your settings set up. In the receiver, you can set what kind of, whether you want smart noise reduction, you can set your output audio level, you can mute it, set your compatibility mode. You can go down over here, give it a name. You can give it a frequency. You can say whether you want it to be a part of a group of frequencies or whether you want it to be a normal. You can set it for what type of diversity. In other words, you can configure everything about that receiver channel you want. Every receiver channel can be set up individually. You can even enable talkback mode if that's what you need to do. And it shows you which frame it's in. Then you can go to the transmitter for that channel and make the settings for it. And it will, by default, match up to the receiver frequency. And then when you're ready to go, you simply, okay, we've got it set up. We want it to be for, let's say, lithium batteries. And we want a, we want the battery timer to go off. I'll just leave it there at 4 hours. You can actually set a timer for the battery. You can say, I want this thing to go. You want an alert when you hit 4 hours of use on your battery, however you want to go. And then once you get it set up, if you have one of the transmitters with the infrared sync in it, I haven't tried this yet this morning, so you send settings to transmitter. Oh wait, do I need to hit sync on this? No, I don't do it. Just hold it up to the unit, send settings to transmitter, and of course, it's not working. Murphy's Law.
Is this where we ask how many Lectrosonics executives does it take to change frequency?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And basically, I know I'm missing a step here, so I'm going to just say it works. I'll let you work that out.
Yeah.
This is your test. All right.
Now, Gordon, another question.
Yes.
You've got it set to change that transmitter's frequency. Does that mean I've got to keep all my other transmitters that are, say, C block?
No, you have to keep it fairly close. It's not something that's going to broadcast out into the room like the remote control for a TV and change everybody in the room. It's something you need to wave up close to it. It's not a distant remote control.
Okay.
Okay, good question. Okay, now the other thing you can do on this, you can, from this screen, you can actually mute a channel. I double click there instead of single click. So you get a red mute on the screen. As you can see, even from a distance, you can tell that that channel happens to be muted. There's also alerts if your battery gets low, if you're having some other issue with the transmitter, lack of pilot tone, and so on. The area around the screen lights up right here. This whole border goes bright yellow or bright red. We called it the 5-yard rule. You had to be 5 yards from your monitor on a laptop, and you have a problem. You could glance over at your laptop and say, oh, channel 3. You'd be able to tell from the distance which channels might need some special attention. So we give you alerts that way. So here's the new thing. Because a lot of you have seen this software before, but today we're releasing the next revision. We also have the ability, a lot of you guys called up and said, this is all great. I love this coordination capability. But what about my UCR 411s? What about my IFBs? What about my camera hop? I've got other RF that doesn't talk through the computer to this program. So now we've added the ability to add in custom channels. So you can create a custom channel. You can go in and you can say, this is going to be on our UCR 411A number 2. And you can go down and say, this is electro block. I'm going to change this is the darkroom mode. We're going to change the view real quick. Let me cancel this for a second. You have different color themes. Let's go to haze gray here. Okay, let's add that custom channel now. So, UCR 411A. We're going to make it block 22. And we're going to make it 100 kilohertz step sizes for now we're using an LT. We want the 25 kilohertz tuning. We set it for that, and we say OK. And now we've added a channel to the rack. So when we go back to our session, we can look at that, and we can also then go back and look at our custom channels. The custom channels will be part of your coordination. You can go back to frequency coordination, and you will have that. Now, there is your custom channel. See, it's a slightly different color blue. The name shows up, the frequency shows up, and if you want to re-coordinate that, you can do so as well. But we already coordinated those other 3 channels, so we can lock them so they don't change. And we'll leave the custom channel, and we'll unlock the custom channel, and then we'll re-coordinate and give it a new frequency. Now, let's say you just want to manually change it. You don't like that. You would rather go somewhere else. You can actually physically move it, and as long as you don't get the little red indicator, that's a valid frequency. So you can manually tune it on the fly as well. So now you can have all your RF kit in the system. How many here use IAS software for coordination or use our coordination services to get an IAS report? Well, more of you should. By the way, if you didn't know that, you can call either our sales department or our customer service department, send us a list of everything in your kit and where you're going to be, and we'll run an IAS report for you. But the real slick part about this
Can I
now,
ask you a quick question? Is there another software program that other people are using?
that's a good question.
Frequency Finder.
Frequency Finder. Okay.
Okay.
Well, what this will do is if you've got an IAS HTML report, basically print to HTML, you can import that into your system. You can actually go out and you can go to custom channels and, whoops, yeah, I want to apply changes and leave. And I can load custom channels from file and go down here and either bring it in as Lectrosonics custom channel file or as an IAS report. So I've got a report here for a sound mixer you guys all know, Peter Liedall. He went to Cleveland.
Poor baby.
And we're going to add it to the current custom channels. And now, you can zoom back.
These are all stored.
These are all in that report. That's what he took to Cleveland, fully coordinated. And you can actually re-coordinate that. You can go back to frequency coordination. Now take a look at the mess we've got.
Boy.
See, that's a bit of a mess. And the reason it is because that's all coordinated for Cleveland, not taking LA frequencies into account and the scan. So we'd have to re-coordinate that one. So you could go in and you could raise, we'll probably have to raise the threshold a little bit for that, just to start. And we can go in and just hit coordinate selected channels. Now this may not fly, because that's a lot of frequencies for right here.
Welcome to LA.
And you can actually put a timeout on the calculations, because what happens in a large coordination like this is the more frequencies you get, the more intermods it has to calculate. There are literally thousands and thousands of calculations that have to be done for something this big. And it looks like in this particular, oh, you know what, there's another problem here.
How many frequencies do you have?
There are 59. Now, I'm going to stop this because I forgot one little step. We need to go in and unlock all the imported frequencies. Now, it isn't here on this version yet, but basically you're going to be able to lock and unlock en masse. But right now, I'd have to do each one individually. But you would go through and right now those are locked, so it couldn't change those. That's why it was taking so long. If we unlocked all of those, and I'm not going to do it now because 59 channels will take too long. But if I went in and unlocked, we could coordinate that whole thing with Frequency Coordinator. And you've got complete control over the parameters of each channel, too. You can go in and adjust its, let's say you need to import non-Lectrosonics products. You've got a Sennheiser, you've got a Shure, you've got a Vaxcom. You want to add that to the coordination. Yeah, well, just, yeah, I wasn't going to go there. But what will happen is you load that in, and you can put in the parameters for that particular brand, starting frequency, stopping frequency, tuning steps, and you can actually go into that custom frequency. I didn't click that, right? There we go. See, now you can see these are all custom frequencies here, and these three are the ones that have the that are in the venue rack. So you can go into these custom frequencies, and that's where you can adjust start frequency, stop frequency, and band, and all of that. So you can completely adjust.
What format is the import file format?
The import file for IAS is their HTML report.
Okay.
And the reason we don't use the IAS native format is because that's IAS, that's their domain, and if they make any changes, it would break it. An HTML report is very clear. We can pick that data out quite cleanly. And then you can also save this into a report that is the Lectrosonics basic format and save that as a file as well. So now you can do a complete coordination on site. Now this software will work with the Venue-2, it'll work with the Venue, it'll also work standalone. So if you wanted to just download this software and use it for your coordination on set, just build your library of your RF equipment, this will work great. The only thing you'll lack, however, is the ability to scan in. Unless you're tied into a Venue-2, you won't be able to get that environment. There is, however, the ability to go in and add the TV channels. You can go back to that frequency coordination screen. It's a little slow because there's 60 plus channels. Then right there, channel 30. Maybe you got channel 30 on the air there. You can double click that.
You can watch football.
Oh yeah, there you go. Watch football. There you go. See how it's highlighted? That means that that particular frequency is now off limits. You're avoiding channel 31. So if you know what's on the air, you can go ahead and do your coordination with that.
Is the patch for the USB patch for the Mac available?
The USB patch for the Mac?
From what I understand, you can't just connect the Venue to the Mac.
Right. Yeah, we do have, yeah, I believe. You know, I don't know if he's finished with that or not, to be honest with you. It is.
I have it wrong.
You have it. Okay. There you go. There's your answer.
There's one particular level. I'm not a Mac. I have this like silver light or something.
You have to install silver light and it'll run.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a Silverlight based program. So yes, it will run on the Mac. And the you can use it with TCP/IP or, like you said, with the patch, make it work with the USB port. Okay. All right. Any questions about Venue-2 or the wireless designer?
Your RF signal indication that is the continuous, is there any way to freeze that or to save it so if you wanted to do a walk test on your own?
There is a walk test recorder. You can go into the unit, go back into your frame, and you can call up the walk test recorder, and you can feed. Now, what you'll have to do is come out of the headphone jack of the unit and feed it either into your laptop, your mic input on your laptop. Okay. And then you start it, and you can pick the channel. You take the microphone, and you walk around, and you got to talk to yourself. You got to say where you are. Okay, I'm underneath the microphone that Glenn pointed at me, and now I'm over here by the monitor, and I'm by Aggie. And you give a narration of where you're walking by yourself. And then you can come back and look at the walk test recording. It'll show you the RF strength. And if you see a massive dip, you'll know where it occurred, and then you can maybe make some antenna changes to compensate for that. So there is a walk test recorder that you can actually do a recorded walk test. The 10-second window that shows up in the individual channel is a rolling 10-second window. You got 10 seconds to spot it, unless it's a problem that's permanent, like a low battery or a loss of pilot tone or something like that, in which case it'll red flag or yellow flag for you, and then you'll be able to spot which one it is easily.
If you have a venue and a venue two,
Uh-huh.
do they all play well together?
They do.
With their Mac?
Yes, absolutely. And it'll also work with the digital system as well. And now with the custom channels, you can include everything else in that mix, so you know what you're getting in your total mix. Okay?
Has there been any integration or anything like tablets or anything like that?
That's kind of on the next to-do list. The guy that does all our programming for this pretty much has a job for life. We have so many things we want to keep adding to this. I don't ever see Gary without a job. He's going to be programming this forever.
Behind it?
Talk about the history and design leading up to the Venue-2. Who are the responsible engineers? How did IQ come about? Can you give us?
We have quite a few interesting engineers working on that. One is a homegrown engineer, Dustin Jones. Dustin is the son of Bruce Jones, our VP of marketing. When I started Lectrosonics, Dustin was like this big. Now he's one of our top RF engineers, and he's the one who actually developed the Intelligent Q design. So he was the focus on that. Anymore, the projects are so complicated, you can't have just one engineer honcho the whole thing. So Mark Hammond is another new young engineer. He developed the VRT2. David Thomas was the one who wrote the firmware and software. It's quite a team putting this product together, and it's a lot of collaboration involved. Any further questions on the products? Let's talk about the FCC, the elephant in the room.
Drum roll, please.
That's for me. Oh, thank you. I had to bring my notes because it's complicated. But on October 3rd, the FCC issued the report and order, and it became a part of the record in November. That means we now know what's going to happen. And some of it's good, some of it's bad, and some of it's ridiculous. And the ridiculous part, I'll start there, is the FCC has generously given us some new spectrum. 25 megahertz bands, 2 of them, at 7 gigahertz.
Oh boy.
Yeah, oh boy. We're talking a wavelength about like this that can't punch through the human body that nobody else wants. You know, so they generously gave it to us to develop new products for. So we're kind of scoffing derisively at that generous move. What's going to happen is the auction begins next month for the 600 megahertz band. That auction will go for a while, and it's called a reverse auction because what it is they're allowing TV stations who occupy that band to turn around and auction their spectrum off to the telco companies. And then the TV station gets a big take of it, and so does the FCC. They basically split the gains. And what the FCC's goal is to empty out 600 to 700 megahertz for cell phone usage. And they're going to allow an 11 megahertz duplex gap. And that is the gap between the reception frequencies for cell phones and the transmission frequencies for cell phones. That 11 megahertz duplex gap, they're only going to give us access to 4 megahertz of that. And you're going to be restricted to 20 milliwatts of power in the duplex gap. And you must be basically a Part 74 user. Get your licenses. Because the one big thing that changed is they defined Part 74 wireless and Part 15 wireless. You guys are Part 74. You can get a Part 74 license, and that allows you to have access to the higher powers, allows you access to certain parts of the spectrum that the Part 15 won't be allowed.
And it gives us a voice.
And it gives you a voice, because that's been our biggest problem. When they first started all this, they thought there were only 1,600 wireless mics in the United States. So now there's also going to be a guard band that's going to separate the 600 meg band from the Part 74 broadcast frequencies. Now keep in mind, all these TV stations that are vacating 600 megs have to move downstairs, down into the 500 meg band. What or go off the air. And what the FCC is encouraging them to do is stack and pack. Stacking meaning, for example, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Channel 5 has 3 broadcasts going on their little piece of spectrum. What they want Channel 5 to do is give up a couple of those and then share it with another network. So that in Channel 5, we would get the public network and maybe ABC and NBC all broadcasting high def within the same 6 megahertz passband. That allows them to get more open frequency. That's what they're hoping will happen. They're also more eagerly hoping that many of the broadcasters out there will say, I give up, I'm no longer going to transmit, I want to just stream and be picked up online and put everybody into streaming. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but now Netflix is taking up almost as much bandwidth on the internet as porn. So they're getting there. Now, the guard band is going to vary depending on the size of the 600 megahertz band. This is where it gets really iffy. What's going to happen is every market's going to have a different 600 megahertz band depending on the success of the auction. So in New York, the 600 megahertz band may extend down as far as 580 megahertz, whereas in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in Albuquerque, the 700 megahertz band is still clear. So the auction's not going to yield much in the smaller markets, but in the big markets, where the duplex gap is going to be and where the guard bands are going to be completely different, and they'll always be restricted to 20 milliwatts. So you're going to have issues with those guard bands. You've got to be very careful and cognizant of what's happening with whatever market you're working in. So that's what's happening in that neck of the woods. They're also opening up other frequencies. They are opening up 941 to 960. That's going to take some considerable development because there's not a lot of parts built for that type of range. We built some 900 megahertz in-ear monitors at 908 to 924. And that got too crowded with things like lighting dimmers. The DMX lighting dimmers ended up in that range. So we're staying away from that particular range. Let's see. So all wireless microphones currently certified to operate in the purposed 600 band must cease operations no later than 39 months after the notification by the FCC. Right now they're doing the auction. Then they have to process the results of the auction. Then they have to do the due diligence to make sure that the guy that bid $10 billion for that 6 megahertz really has $10 billion. And then they will issue the public notice. When the public notice goes out, at that point, we'll know exactly what's going to happen with that market. And when the public notice goes out, that starts the clock on the 39-month window. And during that 39 months, anybody occupying that space will have 39 months to vacate, whether they're a TV station or a wireless microphone operator.
So we're looking at 4 years plus?
We're probably looking at about 4 years before this all dust settles. And here's the interesting part about it. Both NAB, NFL, and the networks themselves are all telling the FCC, ain't no way you're going to get this transition done in 39 months because there's not enough tower crews around to implement the changes into the cell phone operations and to also implement the changes in broadcast. So it's going to take, there's a labor shortage. You know, if you want a good job right now, it's going to pay a lot. You know, if you like high places, the tower guys are in big demand. So for manufacturers, we have 18 months after the notice or 33 months after the new rules take place, whichever comes first. So manufacturers, we have to change the products we're making. They're making changes in our specifications. Wireless microphones in the future must meet what is called the FCC mask, which is the same specifications that they use in Europe. So we're already building that. That's firmware. That's no problem. So we already know how to go there with that. So that actually simplifies things a little bit for us. We're happy about that. The bad news, the ridiculous news, the FCC issued a specification for wireless microphones that specified that spurious emissions at the first spurious emissions have to be minus 90 dBm below the carrier, minus 90 decibels. Well, the current standard is minus 60. That's a 30 decibel drop. 30 decibels is huge and unattainable. There was a typo in a submission by another wireless manufacturer, and they took that and said, well, this manufacturer said we can do that, therefore that's what you shall do. Now, there's an appeal in by all the wireless manufacturers saying, please, dear God, we can't do this. Make it minus 70. And it looks like the FCC is going to go along with that. So it's a minor change. What is uncertain and has yet to be defined is there is an interpretation of one part of the rule. If you have compliant transmitters today in the 500 megahertz band, will you be allowed to use them after the transition? Because, for example, most of the transmitters you're using right now are not FCC compliant. Are you going to be allowed? Are they going to be grandfathered in? A couple of the manufacturers have read the rules to say, no problem, that's going to be definitely not an issue. And others are saying, we're not so sure, we want a little more clarification from the FCC.
How would it go, by serial number? Or?
Yeah, that's what we'd have to do, is just say anything and a serial number after that. So I honestly believe it's probably going to be a grandfather thing. You know, if you're below 600 megs and you meet the requirements otherwise, and you're Part 74 license, that's the big deal here, then you shouldn't have any problems afterwards. But we're waiting for clarification on that rule. So Part 15 users, that's the theaters, the universities, the churches, and so on. They're going to be limited to 50 milliwatts EIRP, effective isotropic radiated power, which is basically means they have to have a fixed whip antenna on their transmitter at 50 milliwatts as measured at a certain distance. That's less power than 50 milliwatts as measured at the port, which is what we do, because we get about 1.5 decibels a gain out of the antenna. So again, being Part 74 really makes a difference there. And let's see, technical rules. So the Part 15 thing, that's not going to really affect you guys. What else have I missed?
Gordon?
Yes.
Did I not just in the last few days read still another bulletin that the NAB and/or a couple of the broadcasters are throwing up some more challenges to the whole auction process?
The question is, if you didn't pick that up on the outer locations, is NAB throwing up more legal fight? And the answer is yes. You know, because the Super Bowl, for example, under these rules would be incredibly difficult to cover. It's very difficult to do something of that scale with the spectrum that they're allocating. And what we would really like to see, and what the broadcasters would really like to see, and what you all would like to see, is kind of a return to what we had before in terms of the rules of operation, where if you're not causing them trouble, you're not causing them trouble. Let it be. Let it be self-enforced. That's really what happened in the 90s, in the 2000s. It was a self-enforcing thing. I mean, if somebody's got a big wattage transmitter on the air, you're not going to cause him problem. The big dog wins. 50,000 watts versus 50 milliwatts or 75 milliwatts, it's not going to make a difference. You know, you're already out of the picture. The key is, how do we manage it? They're also going to allow a 1435 to 1525 megahertz band, but only on a very limited basis and only for large fixed locations, like the Super Bowl. They consider that a venue that's fixed. They're not going to allow that to be mobile. And they haven't left they haven't gotten into the details of that product yet, so we're kind of prohibited from developing anything there because we still don't know all the final rules on that. And then again, we're getting the 7 gig band, and God knows what we can do with that, because that's just so absurd. But the good news, we're still going to be allowed a quarter watt in Part 74. We can still go up to 250 milliwatts. In VHF, we're going to be limited to 50 milliwatts, but that was always the rule before anyway. So, and will we be looking at more products in VHF? Very possibly. There's a lot of limitations there. We're always going to be held now to the ETSI mask, which is the European standard. That means a narrower deviation on the signal. We can compensate for that with some firmware changes, so I'm not really worried about that particular change. So right now, what we've been handed isn't the best in the world. The guy that actually posted the thing said publicly, no one's going to be happy with this. The broadcasters weren't happy. The cell phone guys weren't happy. The wireless guys weren't happy. Nobody's happy. But nobody lost everything either. And that's the case for us. We didn't lose everything. We're going to be able to continue operating wireless microphones in a live environment, on set, on location. There's going to be new strategies. We're going to be looking at things like enhanced antenna systems that are going to allow better capture of the signal and rejection of the unwanted signals. So you're going to see some technological advances over the next few years. I think the big thing is to assure you that right now, purchases you make today are not going to be wasted money, wasted time. You've got to still work for the next 3-4 years. And the demands on your equipment are going to continue. And basically, you're going to be able to move forward. And and you know what we did with the 2009 transition? We offered some very aggressive upgrade and exchange packages for people that had recently purchased gear. We're looking at, since the rules came out October 1, anything purchased from October 1 forward, we will have plans and programs in places as things get clarified in 4 years, 5 years from now, so that I'm not going to let you have those 5 years for free, but you're also not going to have to reinvest from scratch in 5 years. So, questions? Okay, we'll start the exam. If you get your papers from Kelly.
Will this information be available on your website or?
The question is, will the information that I just talked about be available on the website? The answer is yes. We'll be posting a white paper shortly that will kind of detail all of this so that you can kind of follow it. There's still a few floating points like that minus 90 dBm. We want to find out what's happening with that. Are we going to be able to get past that restriction? And so on. And once we know that, that'll give us a more accurate picture. We want to put it up when we know it's settled.
Encouraging.
It is. It is. It could have been much worse. For what the cell phone companies wanted, they wanted not just us, but all broadcast television off the air. They wanted the whole banana. And so that was a little frightening, but the FCC fortunately didn't go that far. Yes, John.
Is there still these white space devices that are going to be occupying this similar spectrum?
Great question. John wants to know, will there be white spaces devices in the spectrum? The answer is yes, they'll be allowed. The problem for the white space devices is the problem they already have. How many people have actually encountered a white space device on set? A high-powered router in the middle of your frequencies. There's a reason for that. You guys signed up. You got on the database. And what happens is the white space devices under their current rules, if you went to Fry's and bought a white space router, for example, a super router running at 575 megahertz, and you took that home and you put it on your, plugged it into the network, first thing it has to do is it has to run out and check the database. And it cannot operate on any TV channel where there is a registered wireless microphone. So let's say Jeff sits there and fires up and registers one channel in channel 31. And that white space device now cannot use channel 31 at all, even though you're only taking up 200 kilohertz of that 6 megs. That white space device has to hop to another 6 meg section. And if it finds one wireless microphone's registered there, it can't use that one either. So what's happened is the white space devices have not taken off because there's just too much stuff out there for them to register. And I think that's going to be the case. There'll be rural instances of white space. You may get on a rural shoot somewhere, a location out in the boondocks somewhere. I can think of some places in New Mexico where they're really going to be relying on white space devices to service large areas. And, you know, you'll be in Tucumcari, New Mexico and discover, wow, there's really this big 6 megahertz pizza hash in the middle of nowhere. But the beauty of that is there'll be lots of other open space because it's still the middle of nowhere. But in New York, I don't know if you could ever sell a white space device. I just don't see it happening.
Any other questions?
Can you repeat it all, Gordon? Because I just.
Yeah, let me start.
I think Aggie had something.
Other manufacturers are on board with coordinating some of this effort with the FCC, and what's the talk and Sure and
Aggie's question is, have other manufacturers been on board with this? The answer is yes. We've actually been in a coalition with Audio Limited, Sennheiser, and Shure, where we have gone en masse to Washington, D.C. And Carl Winkler represented us in Washington. Shure has really been carrying the burden, the biggest part of the burden. They actually hired a lobbyist in Washington to lobby on behalf of all wireless mics and fight for the rules. But it's a constant battle. I mean, we are constantly putting in submissions, objecting to changes and looking for things to protect your interests in this part of the world, because they just don't realize how critical this has become to your job. And what we're going to do in the future is, of course, adapt to the new rules. Like I said, come up with some new antenna strategies and so on. But basically, it looks like we're going to be safe. It's just going to be a little bit, don't buy anything in C1 or 24, 25, and 26. If I was in your shoes, I would not go there. Get the lower blocks. I've heard some guys say, I don't like that 470. I don't like block 19. Boy, that's going to be your best friend in about 4 years, because that's going to still be open space. There's going to be room there. So think about the future in terms of what you pick.
Right.
Okay?
Thanks a lot.
You bet.